My name is Bryan Hirsch. I'm the Deputy Chief Digital Officer for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Before we get started, how many people were here for the first ever design for Drupal 10 years ago? Me and Moshe. I don't think there were 3.gov sessions at the first, probably not 1.gov session. So pretty awesome to see that happening this time around. Can I see show of hands how many people are developers in the room? Okay. Working for Gov projects? Awesome. Okay. So I have lots of content, but I judge a talk by how many great questions and interesting conversations happen. So please feel free to jump in and interrupt if you want to go deeper on something or talk about something. Mostly I want to talk about things that you find useful here. So the title of this talk is Creating a Single Face of Government Across Multiple Websites and Technology Stacks. And I just want to begin with a survey of the basic problem space. So why create a single face of government in the first place? Are there really too many faces today? If so, is that actually a problem? I shouldn't presume that's a problem, right? Maybe you think things are fine. So here are a couple stories to set the stage for this problem. Problem number one. You need a driver's license. Where do you go? It's a pop quiz. You need a driver's license. Where do you go? DMV. Or in Massachusetts, we call it the
RMV.
The RMV. Okay.
Mass.gov.
Go to mass.gov. Great answer. So now imagine that you want to become a rideshare driver. You want to become approved to be a rideshare driver. Now where do you think you go? Google. Okay. Try to guess. I mean, I think you're guessing that it's not RMV because I'm asking the question, right? Doesn't RMV seem like the intuitive place? You're actually the first crowd that didn't say RMV or DMV.
Isn't it the City Hall?
It's not actually City Hall. So in Massachusetts, you need to get approval from the Department of Public Utilities, which is under Energy and Environmental Affairs. So up until recently, you had to leave the website on the left, which is massrmv.com, and go to the website on the right, this is the old mass.gov, where you had to find the Transportation Network Company Division page under this EEA microsite on the old mass.gov. So putting information about how to become a rideshare driver, apart from all the other driving information, is like a grocery store taking an orange and putting that in like the snack and nuts aisle. So having RMV and DPU both interfacing with constituents like this is one example of the many faces of government. So I'm going to call this problem number one, the oranges problem. Here's problem number two. So for this one, let's watch a recording. Shoot, I meant to cue this up before I started my slides. Let's watch a recording from a product test that we did with a tax preparer who's interacting with the brand new mass.gov that we launched this last fall. I actually didn't mean to play the whole thing. I'm just going to zoom in on a part of it here.
What's an example of something that you've come across that was like particularly easy to do, or something that you liked about the site?
Oh, about math?
Mm-hmm.
I love this right here, what they did here, because if that's the stuff you're looking for, which I'm assuming they did because that's where most people go, then it's relatively easy. But at the same time, you know what's missing from that row? Departments. So to some extent, if I need taxes, I can go to taxes. But let's say I know I need DOR. Why isn't there one that says departments? And it lists, Secretary of State, DOR, Treasury, Audit, what all the departments are. Because sometimes you don't know where you want to go, and this is beautiful. And sometimes you know exactly where you want to go, and you have no idea what button to push.
Could you guys hear that in the back? Sometimes you know exactly where you want to go, and you don't know what button to push. You want to go to DOR. So it's tax season when we were doing this test, and she wants tax forms. So she's spot on. The whole big idea behind the new navigation menu is that you shouldn't have to understand how the state bureaucracy works in order to figure out how to navigate to where you want to go. So for many visitors, this is a big improvement. But for power users like her, who visit the website more frequently, who know the specific government organization that they want to go to, this new design has actually made things a little bit more difficult and cumbersome. So how many people here have ever shopped at IKEA? Hands? Okay. What's that?
I was just there, and that's exactly what I thought of.
Really? Okay. So IKEA stores, walk a visitor through this long winding path, and for a shopper who only goes once in a blue moon, the arrows and the installations are like really delightful and nice. But if you know exactly what you want and you know where you want to go, if you can't take those staff shortcuts, that can be a really frustrating experience, right? And so for this power user, that's what it feels like. So this problem number 2, which I'm going to call the IKEA problem, is more nuanced. We don't have 300 microsites on mass.gov anymore, so the problem here is not too many faces per se, it's an expressionless face. So it's an experience that doesn't acknowledge the different circumstances in different relationships, and that can be just as frustrating as too many faces. So here's problem number 3. This is a true story. In 2009, a young entrepreneur registers his small business, as an S corporation in the state of Massachusetts. He faithfully pays his taxes for 10 years to the Department of Revenue on the left, to the Department of Unemployment Insurance, the Unemployment Assistance on the right, and eventually he decides he's going to shut down his business. So he goes back, he's never shut down a business before, he goes back to all of the different government agencies he's ever filed paperwork with and says, what do I have to do to shut down my business? And so he finds out that after several years of failing to file paperwork with the Secretary of State in the middle, as a result of failing to file paperwork with that one in the middle, he didn't actually have limited liability protection for those 10 years that he had been paying taxes and filing paperwork with the other 2 organizations. So for people who don't, know about businesses, that's the whole reason you get incorporated, right, is limited liability protection. So this is like an airline selling the boarding pass separate from the seat ticket. So imagine if you went to the airport and you present your boarding pass and they're like, sorry, you don't have a ticket for a seat, you can't get on the plane. Why in the world would we sell these things separately, right? What a horribly maddening experience. So having DOR and DUA and the Secretary of State all interface this way with businesses separately is confusing, to say the very least. What if this guy had been sued, his family, his home, all of his life savings were all exposed, and he didn't even have any idea? So I'm going to call this problem number 3 the plane ticket problem. So there's a survey of the landscape. Can we agree that this is a suboptimal arrangement? Yeah. Okay. So today, more than 76% of people in Massachusetts interact with government online. That is way more than any other medium. And in less than 20 years, we've gone from 0 to 76%. And we're only just at the very beginning of starting to understand how this shift is changing people's expectations about their relationship with government. So let's look at these analogies again in the context of a relationship. The orange problem is all about look and feel. Look and feel is about setting expectations. When an interaction does not meet expectations, it can be jarring, it can be confusing. If the grocery store puts oranges in the snack aisle, what other produce could be scattered about? Am I at a flea market or am I in a grocery store? Is this really the produce section, or is it really just the big bin section, right? It makes you sort of question these things. And so, you can't help wondering, what else don't I know? Am I even in the right place? The IKEA problem is about navigability, which, it turns out, is about more than just usability. So usability is key, but navigability is also about needing to be seen. it makes me feel like the website is for me, or decidedly this website was not made for me. And then the plane ticket problem is about the platform's success criteria. So success metrics have to shine a spotlight on alignment or misalignment between what the platform provides and what constituents need. So if a passenger needs both tickets to fly, it's not enough for the platform to make sure that we're selling, it's not enough for the platform to make sure just that we're selling tickets for seats and that we're selling tickets for boarding, because we let people down and we create distrust every time we fail to sell the same number of both. So since we can't see with our eyes what you would see, at the gate with an airplane, we need to see this in the numbers. So that's what the numbers need to shine a bright light on. These are the kinds of success metrics that we need to surface and track to make sure that we're meeting people's needs, that we're not just setting expectations, but we're meeting people's expectations. And that's how we build trust and sustain a relationship. So when we talk about creating a single face of government, what we're really talking about is addressing these issues and fixing these dysfunctional relationships. So here's a quick report on work in progress. So we're at the very early stages of this. This is a big long-term project. Here's what progress looks like, and I'll also talk a little bit about some of the unsolved problems so far. So look and feel is about setting expectations. I know where I am. I know where I need to go. I know what I need to do. So I know the oranges are in the produce section. Before our project started, mass.gov was a portal website. So a portal website is a site that points at lots of other sites. At one point in time, portal websites were all the rage. In 2018, what do we call a website that points at other websites?
Spam.
Good one. Really, what's a website that points you to other websites?
Yahoo.
Yahoo, or search engine, Google, Bing. So in the portal world, the rideshare driver needed to find her way to the TNC division of the DPU under EEA's microsite, right? Like finding an orange in the snack aisle. So this month, massrmv.com is going to shut down and redirect to the RMV organizational page on the new mass.gov. So now their organizational page is going to look like all these other organizational pages in this last row here. And since the DPU's background check is a process that's done by email, just reorganizing our content this way is all we need to do. It's all it takes in this case to present a real single face of government. Now that's the user experience. So presenting a consistent look and feel goes a really long way to setting people's expectations and building this kind of trust. Here are a few applications that have tried to make the leap. So these are applications that are not on mass.gov, transactional applications. And they've been trying to extend the design concepts from the mass.gov design to their own applications. On the right, you see the new RMV Atlas system that replaced their mainframe. This is for renewing your driver's license. On the left, you see the Department of Revenue's tax connector, where you go to pay taxes. You can see they've tried to implement the same color scheme and make their fonts look and feel a little more consistent. I see Mo shaking his hands. Yes, and I see Jamie saying like, no way, that doesn't count.
Is this like you picked up the orange and you're on your way to the produce section, you get an aisle away and you're like, I got it near. It's near.
So to be fair to these guys, this shows a lot of really, really, really commendable initiative, and it's awesome that they want to play in the same sandbox with us. This is people from really big institutions with really old technology saying, we want to update our technology, and we recognize that there's value for constituents to having a consistent look and feel. And so they looked at our designs and they tried to make it look and feel consistent. As some of the people with sharp eyes in the room see, it doesn't quite feel right.
And they just switched to the Mass Tax Connect. That's a whole big new thing.
So Atlas is the big new thing. Mass Tax Connect is a less recent big new thing.
In the last few years.
In the last few years, yeah. But it's the will is there. But in the best of scenarios, it's going to be really hard to keep these things in sync, even if you consider them in sync today. In the worst of scenarios, it's they're just going to get wildly out of sync eventually. Like, that's basically what we're scheduling ourselves for, and some people in the room feel like we're already there today. So there are other applications like these that obviously haven't started down this journey with us. So we've got the Secretary of State's website where you register a business. We've got the unemployment insurance website. We've got the corporate filings website. We've got that one in the top right is for transitional food assistance.
Well, the unemployment one is my least favorite one. It's also where you get your weed card. Okay.
So the best approach would be, if we could do something like, Twitter Bootstrap or, Google Material Design. Like, wouldn't it be amazing if we had a design system that, not only encourages a consistent look and feel across the ecosystem, but is actually like easier to maintain and keep up across all the systems, and that will actually like proactively enable us to keep things up to date and in sync together. So we've seen the success of these popular frameworks, Bootstrap and Material. This fall, we're going to be collaborating closely with some of these big transactional applications to start making some movement in this direction. And before we go to the table to them to say, here's some recommendations about how to do this, we're actually trying to eat our own dog food and try this out on some of our own applications. And that way, when we go talk to people who are maintaining these systems that we don't have a hand in maintaining today, we can actually have some like real field tested experience and hopefully some reference implementations to point them to. So here's what that's looked like so far. Let me get my mouse back. So here's what that's looked like so far. So mass.gov's theme is using markup that's generated by this component library, which we call Mayflower. So this version of Mayflower is built with Pattern Lab. It's live at mayflower.digital.mass.gov. And in theory, it's platform agnostic. But as I said before, we recommend it to others. We want to actually eat our own dog food, and reuse it outside of the Drupal CMS. So our very, very first standalone Mayflower app is this wait time widget. So this wait time widget in the middle, you can actually see it standing alone. It's running on GitHub pages at this URL at the bottom. And that is using Mayflower assets to get its look and feel. And then it's getting iframed into mass.gov, where you see it in the top right of this RMV Service Center page. So that was the very first proof of concept. Then the next one, we built this Mayflower starter kit, also running on GitHub pages. And it has a bunch of reference implementations for people who want to do simple standalone pages or small websites or embeddable iframe type projects. So this gave us an opportunity to serve Mayflower assets from a CDN, the way some people will include jQuery into their projects, with an external reference. Next, we started making sites. So first, we made a simple static website for the governor's budget, and then our fanciest, most full-blown implementation of Mayflower to date is search.mass.gov. So this is a React-based implementation of Mayflower. And this is live today, and it feels like a totally consistent experience with mass.gov, but it's technically a totally separate website. So it's our strongest reference implementation. Visually, it's generated using Mayflower markup, so it looks and feels perfectly consistent with Mayflower, down to every link and button click. And if we peek under the hood, it also clarifies some of the ways that we foresee a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts in an ecosystem like the one we're imagining here. So the search results here come from, I'm actually realizing these are slightly outdated screenshots. We'll see a new one in a second. The search results here come from 68 different web properties. Search here is being powered by Google Search API. The promoted results and the advanced filters in the news and laws and regulations tab, I'll show you the laws and regulations tab in a second, are pulling content from an API that's published by mass.gov. So here we're starting to dip our toes into decoupled content management. Massachusetts websites that publish metadata in their HTML according to Google specs are surfaced and available to us through Google's API. And so we're in the process of documenting and publishing those standards so that then anyone who follows our standards can actually have rich, interactive search results that get surfaced right on search.mass.gov. And actually, we just had our first big successful implementation. The legislature just updated all of the laws and regulations on malegislature.gov to include this metadata. And so now you see that on the new Laws and Regulations tab on search.mass.gov. And we don't have anything to do with actually hands-on maintaining that website. So one day soon, anyone who's implementing one of our component libraries will get all of the markup that I just talked about by default, with the markup from those components. So as new metadata fields get updated or added, those updates will get included in new versioned releases of Mayflower. And so you can imagine how that then helps keep the whole ecosystem up to date and supported with things like these interactive search results. So like, imagine if we rolled out a fancy new 5-star rating feature. So you can imagine if everyone's maintaining their own markup, how laborious it would be to try to go site by site and convince people to change their markup and figure out how to get the data into that markup. So for anyone who's implementing one of our component libraries, when they implement a new minor version, an attribute will just appear in their markup. It will have an empty value. And now all they have to do is populate that value with whatever data we need for 5-star ratings. Or maybe it's not 5-star ratings. Maybe we're improving the touch interactions for mobile devices or making an accessibility fix or something like that. So you can imagine how an ecosystem like this gives us so much more infrastructure to keep the system evolving together across the ecosystem and staying in better sync. So in terms of unsolved and unresolved questions for look and feel, branding is a place where we know we need to sharpen our thinking still a bit. So we know there's not value for constituents in having every single department under the sun have their own brand and their own look and feel. That's confusing, right? But it doesn't follow that we only need one brand or that there's no value, to a brand. So, most people can't name most of the agencies, but RMV, for example, has really strong brand recognition. So, we need to sharpen our thinking a little bit on this. Like, where does it actually make sense to invest in a separate brand identity? Marketing campaigns is another place where there's an obvious value proposition for big marketing campaigns to sometimes have their own branding. So this is somewhere we're still figuring out where to draw the lines. Back to navigability. So navigability is about more than usability, right? It's about being seen. Not only do I know how to use the website, I know that the website that I'm on is meant for me. It knows what I need, and it's trying to give me what I need to get the job done. I know the shortcuts. IKEA gets it. They let me take the shortcuts. So mass.gov is at the center of the Commonwealth's digital ecosystem. Its purpose is to provide constituents and businesses the fastest, easiest path to the services that they need. So on the portal website, the old website, all 300 microsites had their own navigation. Navigation mostly mapped to organizational structure. And if you mostly only visit mass.gov for work, you probably also mostly visit one organization. And if you could find your way to that department's page and then find the thing that you need, that's not a bad arrangement for you. But for 80% of our visitors who don't visit mass.gov for work or that frequently or necessarily know what department to go to, that was a confusing arrangement. So here's a 2x2 that depicts that basic landscape. So about 80% of our traffic fits into the bottom left quadrant. And these are people who come to mass.gov fewer than 10 times a year, we think. And they want to get in and out. Many of these interactions are transactional. Renew my license. Apply for unemployment insurance. Apply for mass health. None of these transactions actually happen on mass.gov. So sometimes a person's looking for the information. Because the transactions don't happen on mass.gov, they're passing through mass.gov to get to somewhere else. Or they're looking for simple information. Find a park, get a trail map, things like that. They don't want to know about the department names. They don't want all the gory technical details. So for those users, the new navigation is an improvement. And it's made things better for a lot of people in this quadrant. We used TreeJack to actually test the navigation, to validate that this is an improvement for, for those kinds of people, for like the average user. We also know that navigation is about more than just information architecture. It's also about page layout. So we did some tests with Validately to figure out how our page layouts were and were not helping people navigate to the information that they need. But our job is not done. So the people in the bottom left feel like they're seen, at least, right? Like we haven't reached the end of the journey to make navigation great, but at least these people feel like the site is made for them. It's the power users at the top right who were not our main focus early on. And our mantra early on was do no harm. They weren't our focus, but we didn't want to make things worse for them. I think we underestimated how much muscle memory this top right group had built up around the old navigation. And so, even positive change, change is hard. And so this is a group that we're really working hard to now, deliver an improved experience for as well. And so we're still in the midst of research and design to better understand their needs and keep implementing some improvements. But a lot of this work is about navigability, and we figured out a lot about it. So getting back to a screenshot from the product test that you saw earlier. So to this point of navigability is about being seen. It's not just about usability. When our tester concludes the website's not for her, did you guys hear her say that at the beginning? It looks like if this is for someone who's not like me, then this is probably useful. But she's like, I know exactly where I want to go, and I don't see it here. So she had no idea, she did not realize at all that actually the exact link she describes looking for is on the page she's looking at, in not one but two places on the screen, the top and in the middle here. So obviously she anticipated different text. She's looking for departments, and we're calling them state offices and state organizations. So there's a mismatch there. Like there's a usability problem that we need to address. That's something we can test and fix. But there's another thing going on here, right? That she feels like the site's not for her, and so she's probably not looking as hard, right? So we need for people to feel like this website is for me. It's anticipating my needs and meeting my needs, at least to the extent that I'm going to keep looking hard. There must be a link that's going to give me a list of all of the departments or offices, right? So we're still doing research and testing and designs, but as a start, we've been doing this research. On the left, you can see we've figured out that 20% of our traffic really cleanly corresponds to this group of people on the right of that bar chart who visit, clearly more than the average visitor. That's what that like big jump is, where it says 10%. And these people are overwhelmingly, so we call them power users. A lot of them are people who are visiting for their job. On the left, you can see some improvements that we've made and pushed out already earlier this year. So we've got some content types that are made for long-form content, for people who want hundreds of pages of documentation, who want the technical details, like the actual policy or law, as it's written. We also know that this is a group of users who really wants to navigate by organization. For them, mass.gov is DOR, or for them, mass.gov is DIA, Department of Industrial Accidents. So we are enabling some functionality to let them scope their searches to only search content from a certain organization. And on the right, you can see a design for making the organization pages that represent all these different organizations on the website, more robust, so that, that can sort of be like a microsite without having this, very inconsistent experience across the different organizational sites. So this big navigation shows what all of the different options will be, but in a really consistent way that will meet all the different organizations' needs. So in terms of unsolved problems, the next place I think we need to really sharpen our thinking is on where we need separate sites. So similar to separate brands, it's not that we don't need more than one website. We probably do need more than one website. overwhelmingly, even when we have more than one website, we want to have a consistency to the look and feel across the ecosystem, so that whether you're on mass.gov or you're on unemployment insurance online, it should feel like a coherent, consistent user experience. But even Amazon, so if you look at Amazon on the left, has anyone ever used this departments feature? You can actually navigate Amazon by department as if it was a department store. So they fit a huge, impressive amount of content into this website. And there's a lot there to that consistent experience. But then even Amazon has a few other sites. So on the right, you can see aws.amazon.com, which is Amazon Web Services, whole separate dedicated site. And you can see services.amazon.com, which is for people who are doing business through amazon.com. So we still need to figure out exactly where are the right places to draw the lines. Where is it a value add for constituents to have a separate site, a separate navigation, something to be figured out there. So then back to the plane ticket problem, success metrics. So success metrics align what our platform is designed to provide with what our constituents need. So we can't stop at setting expectations, we have to meet expectations. When we don't meet expectations, we lose trust, and a person wouldn't expect that it's possible to buy a boarding ticket separate from a seat ticket, right? So when transactions happen online rather than between human beings, we need more than common sense to monitor for these nonsensical situations, and then course correct. So to proactively identify where our digital platform is or isn't meeting users' needs, that's where we need these success metrics. So another way to think about it is all content has a purpose, and content is either fulfilling that purpose or it's not. So we want success metrics that will help us zero in on the places where we're meeting people's expectations and do more of it, or identify where we're not, so we can figure out how to continuously improve. Has anyone heard the saying, you can't manage what you can't measure? So 2 years ago, we were measuring very little in terms of our digital interactions with people through our websites. So optimizing to meet users' needs was really difficult. It was done ad hoc. We had these big blobs of unstructured content that could be used for everything, and so they were basically masters of nothing. So today, we have a new platform that is still under active development. Just doing a little time check here to see how far into the weeds I can drag you guys on this topic of analytics. So I'm going to speed us up a little bit because I want to make sure that we have a little bit of time for questions. How many people here have used Google Analytics? Everyone, great. Okay. So, the gap between having Google Analytics, when you show people Google Analytics for the first time, people say, wow, look at all this data, right? And then the second time you pull up Google Analytics, it's like, what do I do with all this data, right? So, closing that gap is not trivial. It takes a lot of knowledge of Google Analytics, a lot of knowledge about the website and the business case for the website, and then a lot of technical knowledge to figure out how to crunch that data and figure out, is the website or isn't the website performing, living up to its purpose. So now that we have highly structured content, we know enough about the business case that we believed a year ago, and I think we've proven now, that we know enough to do a lot of the pre-processing of that Google Analytics data to prevent a lot smaller chunk of data in a more opinionated, directive way to our content authors and content managers, so that they can more easily come to the conclusion and more quickly come to the conclusion, this stuff is working or it's not, and really be data-driven and really be responsive to user feedback and continuously improve the performance of their content. So here's how we've gone about trying to crack that nut. So early on, we built some proof of concept analytics dashboards and embedded them into the CMS. And at the early phase, it was really about, just technically, do we even have the pieces so that we can do something like this, like get Google Analytics into the CMS? So these are real screenshots. Here's a dashboard on the left. On the right, you can see that same dashboard being embedded directly into Google. And then in the top right, I don't know why we have that top right slide. Just focus on the middle two. So we technically validated that it's possible. Then fast forward to this last fall. Then we did some experiments to verify that we could identify underperforming pages in the CMS, improve them, and then verify with data that we've actually made improvements. So between October and December, we did a series of these experiments. All in all, the experiments were pretty successful. 14 out of 15 experiments produced improvements. So in this slide, what you see is that the traffic to request unemployment benefits doubled after we made a few revisions just to the language on this page. The short descriptions, the titles, and then promoting this page on a couple other pages that are clearly related to it. So simple changes, doubled the traffic. This is the cancel your vehicle registration page. You guys see this huge spike in people answering yes to the question, did you find what you're looking for? So all we did on this page was clarify that cancel your registration means the same thing as return your plates. There were a bunch of people looking for return your plates. Didn't realize it's the same exact thing as cancel your registration. So we clarified that, and user satisfaction had this huge spike. So in aggregate, 73% of our experiments increased positive feedback, 67% increased page traffic, and 26% increased the outcomes that we get from the pages, the downloads or the clicks to the apply buttons, things like that. So that's a start. So then the question is, can we package up this information in a way that we can hand it off to our content managers in a way that they can then replicate this kind of success, right? So in the next quarter of the year, between January and March, we ran a pilot to try and find out. So think of this as like a design test, the same way that you might test information architecture or designs or wireframes, but for an analytics dashboard. So before we write the ETL scripts or code the dashboards and then embed them in the CMS, we want to figure out, do we actually have something that people can reasonably use? So we took the 9 different charts that came out of our fall experiments, and then we organized them into categories that will be intelligible. So the categories are findability, outcomes, content quality, and user satisfaction. So findability means, are the constituents able to find the thing they're looking for? Outcomes is, are our pages effective at enabling people to complete the task they came to complete? Satisfaction is the constituent experience fast, easy, and wicked awesome? Are they happy with their experience? And then content quality is, are we providing content that's easy for constituents to read, understand, written at a 6th grade reading level, etc. So we organize our indicators into these 4 categories. We then supported 4 different government agencies in running 150 content performance experiments, and then used those to validate or refine our proposed indicators for these dashboards. So over 80% of our pilots resulted in measurable performance improvements. And now, version 1 of the dashboard, so then we spent the next quarter, this last spring, actually building out these dashboards, automating all this analysis, and wiring it all up to Drupal. So what you see here was live in stage 2 days ago, and is going out to production imminently, will be released to our users in the next 2 weeks. And this is a real screenshot. This is what our administrative theme looks like. Excellent job, Last Call Media. Thank you very much. So here you see on the back end of a node edit page, there's this analytics tab. And if you click the analytics tab, you get an overall performance tab where you get like a score. The scores are mapped to GPAs. So 4.0 is an A, a 0 is an F. And it gives you a very quick sense of, like, based on the indicators we've got, are you doing great or terrible or somewhere in the middle? And then if you scroll down this page, it'll show you how that breaks out across findability, user satisfaction, content quality, and outcomes. And then if you want to drill deeper into any of those different scores, you can click those other tabs. And the very last tab has tips for improving your content. So there's tons of low-hanging fruit. You can't replace a a sit-down meeting with like a real content strategist. But there's a lot of things that a lot of people can do by just following the tips on that page to like really boost the performance of these pages. Here's a quick GIF if you want to just get a quick glance at what these dashboards look like. So, if we can get 100 of our 400 content authors and editors using these dashboards, thinking about the purpose of their content and whether their content performs or not, that'll be a sea change in the performance of this content. So, it's a big leap in the right direction, but there are still some pieces we need to put in place to get a platform like this into a place where it's really equal to the plane ticket problem that I talked about earlier. So in terms of what's left unsolved, so if you think about what mass.gov's piece of this puzzle is, the performance indicators that you saw a second ago are measuring page-based performance. So we're looking at individual pages and saying, what's this page for, and is it living up to its purpose? So, there's more to a user journey than just what happens on the page. So the next step for the dashboards will be to have some indicators for how's the journey performing. When someone clicks across multiple pages, is that a successful experience or not? How many people end up at dead ends? That's not surfaced in the dashboards yet. That's something that we're working on over this next year, and we've got some good hot leads for how we think we're going to go about that. So if you think about making those dashboards reflect the journey's performance, that's like a chunk. Have people seen a user journey map like this? So for people who haven't seen this, what this is visualizing is an end-to-end user journey. So at the start, let's say I just lost my job, and then all these stops along the way are the process of figuring out if I'm eligible for unemployment assistance, eventually applying, eventually getting it or not getting it, and all the stops. So mass.gov has a slice with many points, but it's not actually the true end-to-end journey, right? Or start a business or get a fishing license or whatever. There are stops that are not on mass.gov. So in the near term, the next big step is go from page-based performance indicators to journey-based indicators, and we're doing that in the next year. But then the other thing that we're starting to do over this next year is to pilot true end-to-end user journey research and mapping with our partner agencies. So, from when someone becomes unemployed to actually getting unemployment insurance or getting their fishing license, map out all the stops, and then work with our government partners to figure out, where there are frowny faces on the bottom of this map, that we want to, zero in on that particular experience and make it a more positive experience. Push this line up so that across the journey, it's a better experience. So in terms of being able to do this across the ecosystem, the next big leap will be to implement cross-domain tracking so that our dashboards are not only thinking about the performance of the journey on mass.gov, but they're actually, looking at the whole ecosystem. So we're going to be doing some cross-domain tracking pilots this year, looking ahead to next year, hopefully starting next summer, scaling out an approach to doing this kind of cross-domain tracking and including those insights into these analytics dashboards. And then riding alongside that, we go until 4:30 or 4:20?
On 4:20 officially, I think they'll let you go.
Okay.
4:30, someone's going to want to take over the streaming.
Right. Okay. Well, if people want to hear more about how those pilots are going to go, there's some interesting technical details, but maybe that's a good place to leave it. This is the last sort of big, unsolved piece in the three big topics that we're talking about here. So we've made good progress. There's still a lot to figure out, and we're really excited to be working on this stuff. So in conclusion, Digital Services' mission is to leverage the best technology and information to make constituents' interactions with our state government fast, easy, and wicked awesome. And in our day-to-day work, we talk a lot about fast and easy. Wicked awesome is a little more elusive. So single face of government, catapulting people's relationships into the 21st century, I think that's the part that's all about awesome. So setting people's expectations, making people feel seen, acknowledged, and respected, understanding people's needs, knowing when we meet them, knowing when we don't, and continuously improving. continuously iterating on government for the people. But I think that's the heart of Wicked Awesome. So, thank you all for coming to talk. I would love to hear any thoughts or questions. Very interested to know what brings some of the Govies to the room, and if there are opportunities for us to collaborate, we are delighted to share ideas and code and data and analytics and war stories and things like that. We're also hiring. So if anyone's excited about some of the things that they heard me just talking about, we need rockstar back-end developers and front-end developers and project managers and user experience researchers and visual designers and data scientists. So if you're any of those things or know people who are some of those things, feel free to talk to me about that too. Thank you guys. Yeah.
Could you tie the solutions to the plane ticket problem a little bit more explicitly to the gentleman who's trying to register his business appropriately all those years?
Sure, yeah. Sorry for not landing that more succinctly. And so the most complex version of this problem is when you've got government organizations who by design are not made to work together. So, it's not actually crazy the way that we've separated the way we do record keeping and manage the executive branch of our government. Like, separation of powers is like a thing that we did deliberately. So technically the Secretary of State is part of the executive branch, but that office is a constitutionally elected office and is by design separate from like the governor's office. So, when you think about it, having the official record keeper of the state, who is also the administrator of elections, be separate from like the governor's office, for example, is a really good way to like ensure, healthy, clean elections and things like that. So, by design, there's a level of independence between these different executive functions. And so that's why Department of Revenue and Department of Unemployment Assistance are actually like on a totally different side of the government than the Secretary of the Commonwealth, who manages the records, who manages all the corporate filings. So unlike a human interaction where you go to board a plane and you'd hand someone a ticket, and then like a person would like hear you yell at them when you're like, why in the heck would you sell me a boarding pass without a seat? It's not that like the Secretary of State is not watching his numbers and doing his business, and that like DOR is not like watching their numbers and their business. It's that they've just got different systems. So if we can put real success metrics in place, so we're actually talking about start a business like as a journey that we might do for a pilot this next year. So imagine if the user interface is actually the comprehensive checklist. Like these are all the things you need to do to start your business. So we can present a user interface that will surface and make plain for you if you've done all the steps or not. And we can use this integrated analytics platform to surface and make very clear, have we sold a different number of boarding passes and seats? There's just not an easy way to see it today. But this is a great problem to solve with technology. Like that's a numbers problem we can solve.
There would be like a journey mismatch on their analytics page.
Yes. Yeah. So it's just, there's just no easy way to see it.
Yeah.
Let's just surface and visualize that so we can literally see it. And then just talk to people about it.
So way more people are getting their unemployment registration squared away than the people who are getting their filings done.
Yeah.
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 All right.
Got
Yeah.
another real world example that parallels that. So I live in New Hampshire, which is a little behind, I think, Massachusetts in terms of their digital presence. And was renewing my driver's license, and first of all I couldn't find the opening hours on their site because it kind of looked like an ad. But anyway, didn't find, so navigation's important. And then, okay, now I know to go to the RMV at the time and register, and here's the things I need to bring. And something about real ID, I don't know what it is. And I get there and they're like, so, do you want real ID? And I'm like, sure. And they're like, well, you have your passport. I'm like, no. Why would I have brought my passport? And so, you actually, if you don't know about what real ID is, in the near future, and I think it depends on what state you live in, you'll need it to board an airplane. So actually, very similar to parallel. But I just didn't have any idea why do I care about real ID? It was just like this asterisk. But in retrospect, I wish I brought a passport to do that registration. And that's maybe a real metric that they could track, where you have more people coming in and actually doing real ID over time.
So I can't resist the opening. So RMV actually funded this feature that wasn't even on our roadmap, but it's so cool.
Yeah.
Real ID or standard driver's license. Find out if Real ID is right for you. So if you're in Massachusetts and you don't want to repeat the sad story that Aaron just told everyone, you can click this button and it'll walk you through a series of yes/no questions, and it'll tell you if Real ID is right for you. I can renew my driver's license or ID at a AAA location. Look at that. So anyway, if you live in Massachusetts, check this out. It'll tell you everything you need to know about Real ID. And if you live in New Hampshire and think that we're doing it right in Massachusetts and they should do something like this, put them in contact with us. We'd be happy to share our code base with them, and they can even copy the content from the wizard if they want to.
Actually, I was wondering if you've been looking at conversational UI for forms especially, and that's a good example of this.
Yeah, we would love to do more with conversational interfaces. It feels a little, in walk, crawl, run, that's a little more run. We're still sort of walking on many fronts. But as we're doing more with machine learning, it's something that we want to look more and more at. It feels like as more of our constituent service hotlines and things go online.
Potentially Alexa skills or something.
Yeah, or even just having chat support. Like today, you can only reach constituent service people via phone. I don't think we do chat. I think actually Courts does chat. That's the only one I know of. So you can imagine, those conversational interfaces, getting a boost from some, AI chiming in with answers to questions and things like that. Question in the back. And actually, can you guys say your names when you're, because I'd love to know who you are.
Oh, Michael?
Yeah.
I work at Princeton University. I was wondering, was your team tasked with managing all the disparate sites before you did the redesign? Is that part of your digital services team task?
So when the project started, Mass.gov was running on top of a legacy system that was sort of crumbling around itself, and already hosted 300 microsites on that one site and on that one platform. So, think of organic groups with a single Drupal installation powering what's effectively 300 different websites. So out of the gate, we had this sort of centralization for those 300 that made it so that they were all part of the initial replatform. In the middle of the 2-year first phase of this effort, Mass IT became the Executive Office of Technology Services and Security. So last year there was this enabling legislation that created this new agency. So our agency got this big promotion. Our boss is now a member of the governor's cabinet. And I'm told this is one of the biggest restructurings of state government in decades. So that legislation also created 4 new roles. 2 of them are Chief Digital Officer and Chief Data Officer. And that's my boss, Holly St. Clair. So as Chief Digital Officer, she now is technically, effectively the product owner for all the public-facing web properties. So at the beginning of the project, Mass.gov sort of had this momentum because it had those 300 things inside of it. Today, technically as Chief Digital Officer, even though we don't actually run we think there's something like 500 to 800 other websites in the ecosystem still. So even though we're not technically managing all of them, she's a major stakeholder in them, and that's how we've started conversations with people about things like bringing everything into the same look and feel and collaborating more closely. Yeah. Is there another session that's starting here?
No, about 5 minutes.
Okay. All right, so you're starting? Okay. Take a last question? All right, why don't we let other people come up, and I'm happy to stick around and talk after. Thank you all so much.